response of Professor Maudlin?
I mean, I guess appropriate for the other philosopher on the panel, let me take the exact opposite point of view the first philosopher took. I guess and let me quote Plato, too, because Plato's a good place to begin. Because Plato, in the Meno, a question of cognitive limitation comes up. Because in the beginning of the Meno, Meno's worried about how he can become excellent or successful, or have arete, for those of you who know the Greek. It's hard to know exactly how to translate it properly. And he asks Socrates, well, do people come by this by natural gift or by training? I want my sons to be excellent, to be successes. Who should I take them to learn that skill? And Socrates says, you know, I'm so far from knowing that I don't even know what it is. I don't know what arete is. And Meno's shocked, of course. He says, well, you don't know what success is. It's to be rich and powerful and to have everybody look up to you and so on. And Socrates says, Meno, you're so wise. Please define arete for me. And in the usual way, he offers several definitions, which Socrates then destroys. And then there's a very interesting point, because Meno says, look, I just don't know what to say anymore, Socrates. I don't know what it is. And Socrates says, well, I don't know what it is. Let's talk about it. And Meno's response, of course, is, oh, we're a bunch of idiots here, right? I don't know. You don't know. What's the point of continuing the conversation? And this leads to sort of a really critical point in the Platonic dialogues when Socrates then goes on to do a math problem, as a matter of fact, to demonstrate that a slave who's never been trained in geometry can nonetheless come to appreciate the correctness of a particular question about how to build a square with twice the size. And it leads to the Platonic theory of reminiscence. In any case, Socrates at the end of this demonstration says, I don't know if everything I've said is right, but I do know this, that there's the lazy argument, because Meno has given Meno's paradox. He says, look, if I don't know what it is, if I don't know what virtue is, if I don't know what arete is, even if I should run across it, even if we should happen to give the right definition by accident, how would we know, right? How will I recognize that I've got it right? Because I don't know what it is. And so Socrates does this to say, well, actually, there are cases where you start out not knowing the answer. By hard thinking, you can not only come up with the right answer, but know that it's right by a proof. And Socrates says, you shouldn't believe the lazy argument that tells you not to look. And of course, it leaves open the question, how far can we get? And this is sort of one of our questions of cognitive limitations. How far can we get by thinking clearly, by trying to be as accurate as we can, by doing as many experiments as we can? And even if we can't prove we can get as far as we'd like to, or we can get everywhere, we shouldn't stop until we hit a wall, right? You shouldn't be convinced by someone's abstract argument that there's a limitation. You're likely to stop looking too early. So I'm very suspicious. I don't find Chomsky's argument at all compelling to say if I can do one thing, it therefore follows I can't do something else. That just strikes me as being sophistry, quite honestly. Now, you know, there's an interesting question, how much we can know about the physical. I mean, we have several questions on the table, and people can take up what they know. There's the mind-body problem. So if we know everything about the physical world, would we then come to understand why there's consciousness, why there's a mental world at all? There are some people who think physics just doesn't have the resources to answer that question. There's the question of limitations of physics itself, right? Can we ever come up with the right theory, or are we just not smart enough? This is Steven Weinberg's problem. It's like trying to teach classical mechanics to a German shepherd. You just can't get it, right? But we've been very successful somehow with physics. I mean, continue to be very successful in at least producing a physics that works tremendously well. To know about the physical world, we have to interact with it in certain ways. And we can only find out as much as we can find out that those interactions allow. So physics itself can put limitations on what we can know about the physical world, right? You can sort of see that the physics of the world might not allow us to know for sure what the physics of the world is, which is a very interesting situation, and you can talk about cases like that. And then there are other cases, I guess, that people here have thought about the limitations of mathematics, because we use mathematics as the language in which to state physics, so limitations in mathematics or our mathematical understanding could lead to problems. But I guess, I think these are all individually very interesting questions, but I do want to push back against the idea that there's some obvious reason to see that we're going to bump up against some wall we can't get beyond. We might. We ought to keep that in mind, but I don't see any reason to convince ourselves that we're perpetually limited with respect to the things we want to know.